if you can't tell by what I titled this video, which I'm probably just going to title it "My Thoughts on Regulation H," you probably aren't going to know what this is about. So Regulation H, this is a Pokemon video. I'm sorry, I know. My last one was a Pokemon video as well, and I apologize. I swear I do more than just play Pokemon. I'm lying to you, but that's okay. You can just believe that for now. So Pokemon has an official format in which you can actually play the video game with a competitive set of rules. I'm going to explain this as if you don't know them. So just take that with a grain of salt. If you do, you can probably skip a bit. I'm not going to put timestamps because I'm lazy. But it's okay. Anyway, basically, it allows you to. It's a 2v2 format. You have six Pokemon, but you pick four to go in each battle. And it's two alongside each other, and you fight until you either take all their Pokemon or time runs out, which is rare on the latter. But usually, you just go until you can take all your opponent's Pokemon. It's pretty great. It's usually like best of three. This is interesting because with Scarlet and Violet and Terastallization, they have open team sheet, which is new to Pokemon, but it's more to just lower down the randomness of having one of 19 possible Terra types. So it's pretty interesting. Regardless, Regulation H is the newest regulation for this format, and it's interesting for a couple of reasons. One, I believe this is the first time we've had a regulation in which we've allowed restricted Pokemon and then took them out. So for Regulation G, for example, it allows the use of restricted Pokemon now. Uh, Restricted Pokemon, box legends. Best way to put it. If a Pokemon is on the box cover and they're a legendary Pokemon, it's a restricted legend. Think like Kyogre, Groudon, Ho-Oh, Lugia, those type of Pokemon. There's also other legendary Pokemon which are not restricted Pokemon. These are the sub-legendary Pokemon. Think Moltres, Zapdos, Articuno, Cresselia, stuff like that. Also, Mythicals are never really allowed in VGC except for one format back in the Sword and Shield era, but that was different. Anyway, so this is the first format where we no longer have restricted Pokemon as well as Pokemon that are considered legendary. We also don't have any Paradox spawns, so we're not running into like the Flutter Mains and Iron Bundles of the format. It's just straight Pokemon, which I honestly love, and I think this might be my favorite format because of it. And the reason I say this is because when we got into, I think it was Regulation F, which allowed the use of Paradox Pokemon, if I'm not mistaken, as well as the new Pokemon that came in. There was a couple of new Pokemon which people were excited to use, those like Ursaluna, and that was kind of really it. We had some like Hisuian Arcanine pop up, and that was cool, but outside of that, people didn't really mess around with it too much. When you have stuff like Fluttermane and Iron Bundle and Iron Hands and like Great Tusk running around, you don't really need all these other Pokemon. Then they introduced Regulation F. I'm pretty sure it's ERF. I'm not sure. The next regulation they added the Urshifus and the Crystalias and stuff, and that was also a lot of fun. Then we got to Regulation G, which was our previous regulation. That one was also it was fun, but when you have Pokemon like Zacian running around, Zacian didn't really do much this format, but for an example, you have stuff like Zacian and Kyogre and Zamazenta. Those are going to be the Pokemon that are kind of running the format. Matter of fact, I'm not mistaken, I believe not Ice. I'm sorry, that was Sword and Shield. Shadow Rider Calyrex won a real decent amount of events, and I'm pretty sure Miraidon also won some interesting events. Those are cool. Those formats are dope, but when you centralize a format around really strong Pokemon, you're going to need Pokemon to balance it that's going to have a really specific niche. So, for example, if Kyogre is really prevalent, you might want to use something like Gastrodon. Gastrodon is really good when there's a good water, and usually Gastrodon is kind of solid when Urshifu Rapid Strike is running around because he's one of the strongest water Pokemon in the game, probably outside of Kyogre, which will probably be another video in itself. I think Kyogre is probably the best legendary ever made, but we're not going to talk about that today. Focus on Regulation Age. And so there's a lot of Pokemon that came out that really didn't get a chance to shine. And I specifically mean the Hisuian Pokemon from Arceus, because Legends Arceus introduced Hisuian forms of quite a few Pokemon, Typhlosion, Decidueye, Samurott, Avalugg, stuff like that. A couple Pokemon got Hisuian forms, which is really interesting. And for some of these forms, it was kind of like, it was just new stuff you could play around with. But it's hard to play around with that kind of stuff when there are huge restricted legends in there. And so Regulation H, we've seen a drop off of obviously you can't use restricted mons and you can't use any other legends or paradox mons. So it just kind of seemed like a wave of creativity. For example, Corviknight's being used quite a bit. With Mirror Armor, it has a Mirror Herb, which is really nice. It also gets access to like Body Press and like Bulk Up and stuff like that. It becomes a really powerful Pokemon. It's kind of hard to remove sometimes with Root support, and you can use berries and stuff to kind of help with it. Interesting. It's a really good mon. But This video is mainly being made because of Sneasler. Sneasler is the evolution of Hisuian Sneasel. So it's kind of a new Pokemon. It's not really like equivalent to Weavile, but it kind of is because they both evolved from a Sneasel. But Sneasler is poison fighting. It's insane. Its stats are kind of good. I mean, it's not like the best Pokemon when it comes to bulk, but it has a pretty decent attack and speed stat. It's meant to be kind of like a glass cannon, which makes sense because that's what Weavile is. It's not really changing the mode too much. But what's interesting is it has a signature move called Dire Claw. And Dire Claw has a 50% chance to inflict either poison, paralysis, or sleep when you hit the opponent, which is insane. Okay, I want you to just realize how crazy this is. Basically, if you can hit something that's not a steel type, you can poison it, paralyze it, or put it to sleep half of the time. And this gets even crazier if you factor in the fact that some people run Sneasler with the Poison Touch ability, which Poison Touch means if you make contact with a Pokemon, you have a 30% chance to poison, and that puts it at, I think it's like a 65% chance to inflict status. But you don't even need to do that, because Sneasler has another ability called Unburden. And Unburden is an ability that boosts, it doesn't boost, it doubles your speed if your Pokemon's not holding an item. Now, obviously, in competitive play, you want to hold items, that's what you want to do. But people have been finding ways to use items because that still activates your Unburden. So, for example, a lot of people are using Focus Sash Sneasel. This allows your Sneasel to come out. It can tank a hit without having any investments into HP or the defenses, live at 1 HP because of Focus Sash, and now it's faster than everything on the board, and you can start spamming Dire Claws to everything not named Goldango. And that's pretty good. I've actually been playing around with Grassy Seed Sneasler because most of the time I bring Rillaboom to my games, and he sets up grassy terrain. The Grassy Seed gets off. I actually play like a bulky Sneasler, so it allows us to take like at least 1 or 2 hits on the physical side with the Grassy Seed up, and then it can just start spamming like Dire Claw and Acrobatics. It's really strong. And because it's so strong, it's seen a rise in one of my least favorite Pokemon this generation for the sole purpose of how good it is, and that's Goldango. Goldango's really strong. I think Goldango's probably the best non-legend Pokemon from this generation, if we don't count the paradoxes. I think it is. Goldango's insane. It still goes typing's really good. We should have known this, of course, because of things like Aegis Slash existed in the past. Not to mention its good as gold ability, preventing status moves from just hitting it, which crazy. You can't Will-O-Wisp or Thunder Wave it, and that's really good. This also applies to other moves like Parting Shot, so you can't even like Parting Shot out on it. It's insane. Goldango's really good, and it also has a really cool move in Make It Rain, which I do love that move. It has some drawbacks. It's really strong. It lowers its special attack, but the way you use Goldango is you use Nasty Plot and you start spamming that move, and it's pretty good. Uh, but it's like a trickle down effect because Goldango usage goes up, so does ground type usage. And I've seen a lot of people running either Garchomp or Ursaluna, and Ursaluna is insanely strong. We're going to talk about Garchomp first because it's tried and true. Um, Garchomp's good in almost every metagame it's in. It's a really insanely well built Pokemon. It's right above the like minimum required speed stat you want on a Pokemon, which is 100. Its attack is not slept on. It has really good offensive typing, being Dragon and Ground, and I think it's just a very strong Pokemon. Not to mention that you can do some kind of gimmicks with it. You can do like Sandvale next to Tyranitar, or if you just want to have it as like a bulky one with rough skin, it's an insanely good Pokemon. I think Garchomp being useful here is kind of how it is. But the other ground type that's very popular is Ursaluna. Now there's two Ursaluna forms. We're going to talk about both because I do think both of them are really cool and strong. First we have Ursaluna, just standard Hisuian Ursaluna, and that one's really good. It's a very slow physical attacker, and excuse my voice crack there. A very strong physical attacker, and it's really slow, which is great in Trick Room. So you set up Trick Room and you start sweeping. It's a normal ground type, so it gets stab off things like Facade and Headlong Rush and Earthquakes and stuff like that. But more importantly, it has the Guts ability, which is really good. You give it a Flame Orb, you burn yourself after a Protect, and you start spamming things. And if you factor in the fact that you can Terra Normal Facade something, the damage starts to rack up. If you don't know, Facade is a base 60 power move, I'm pretty sure, that doubles in power if the user is inflicted with a status. Burn being one of the statuses, basically make it at 120. If you Terra Normal, you not only get your stab boost, but it's like your stab boost is boosted to 2 times instead of 1.5. You basically have a base 240 power move for free, and it's pretty good. I want to factor in that Hyper Beam has a less power than that. Hyper Beam hits pretty hard. Um, but Ursaluna is really good. It's really great, and on Trick Room teams, it's amazing. Now, Ursaluna Blood Moon equally as good, completely different Pokemon. So Ursaluna Blood Moon's a little bit faster, not too fast. So it still works in Trick Room most of the time, but it's a little bit faster than Ursaluna. It also has the other benefit that it's not a physical attacker, it's a special attacker. And it has its signature ability called Mind's Eye, which allows it to hit ghost and type Pokemon with normal and fighting moves, which is pretty good. It also prevents its accuracy from being lowering, which is a very niche thing, but like can come in clutch sometimes. And also, it has a signature move called Blood Moon, which is, I think, a base. Is it 150? It might be more. It's a pretty high price power move. Maybe base 140. I think it's 140. Base 140 move, very strong. And the only downside is you can't use it 2 turns in a row. So you can use Blood Moon, use different mood, go back to Blood Moon, and that's kind of the gameplay you do with it. But Blood Moon's usually like a nuke button. If you're hitting that, say you can't switch into Ghost to tank it. It's just gone. Like Blood Moon's really strong. Now, both of these Pokemon being really good, they're really good on Trick Room teams, which, once again, like I said, it's a trickle down effect because Sneasler's good, it makes Goldango good, which makes Ursaluna good, which makes Porygon 2 good. Porygon 2 is probably one of my favorite middle stage Pokemon. It's also my favorite version of Porygon. I like the little, it looks like it's a little smooth duck, and I think it's adorable. But Porygon 2 is probably like one of the best Trick Room setters, and the Violite set's insanely bulky because it was not designed to have an evolution. It was designed to be the evolution of Porygon. So it's just that it's that kind of mindset that it wasn't really, they weren't thinking ahead when they made Porygon 2. So you give it a Violite, it can tank a lot. It has access to recover. It has semi decent stabs. It gets access to like Ice Beam and like T-Bolt, I'm pretty sure. But most of the time, just use it as like a bulky Mon that can sit on the field, annoy your opponents, tank moves. I've seen a lot of people running like Terra Blast on it because it gets stab off of it because it's a normal type. But you can also terrestrialize into a new type and then get stab off of it. So I've seen a lot of like Terra fighting Porygon to kind of help it beat through like dark types and steel types as well as like rock types and stuff like that. So I do feel like Porygon 2's really good because of its trick rooming set, which then leads to other Pokemon being good on different archetypes. Now we've hit this little ramp right here, but there's a lot of other Pokemon we need to talk about. So because Sneasler's good, it leads to another Steel type being good, and that is Artralodon. Artralodon is the new evolution for Duraludon from last gen, and it's really strong. It's a Steel Dragon, so it resists Dire Claw. Although it takes a lot from close combat, I mean it's a really bulky Mon. It has access to the ability Stamina, which makes it really good and annoying to get off the field, as well as getting access to moves like Body Press. So its Stamina is ramping up its defense. The Body Presses are hitting a lot harder because it calculates based off your defense versus your attack. Not to mention, it gets a signature move in Electro Shot, which is a 2-turn attack that raises your special attack and then fires a bolt. But because if you're in the rain, it's not a 2-turn attack, it's just a 1-turn attack. So you just get like an instant boost and a fire and an electric attack off. And it's not a weak move by any chance. And I feel like Artralodon's really strong because of it. Um, be, but because you need the brain set up for that move to actually be a very functional strategy, and Artralodon's a really powerful Pokemon. It runs a lot of events. It leads to Pelipper. Without going down this ladder, right? Pelipper's really good. And now Pelipper, if you guys know Pelipper, you probably haven't thought of this mon in forever. You're probably thinking, how is Pelipper good? Well, in Generation 7, they decided to give Pelipper Drizzle as an ability, which is originally Kyogre's ability. So now that Pelipper has it, whenever it comes in, it sets up the rain. And that does so much for the next couple Pokemon we're going to talk about because rain teams are insanely strong, and Pelipper and Artralodon are usually the base of that team. Um, so it sets up rain. It has access to moves like Wide Guard, which stops spread moves. It has access to Tailwind, which doubles your Pokemon speed. Also, it gets access to Hurricane, which never misses in the rain. It gets Weather Ball, which becomes a base 100 power attack in the rain. And Pelipper isn't weak. It's actually better to use Pelipper than it is to use something like Politoed because it hits harder and its stabs are better. So because Rain is really good because of Pelipper and Artralodon, this leads to other Pokemon like Basculegion. Now, Basculegion is an evolution of Hisuian Basculus or White Stripe Basculus. I'm pretty sure. I don't think it's called Hisuian Basculus, just White Stripe, because you have red and blue from Unova, and then you have White Stripe from Hisui. So yeah, it's just the evolution of White Stripe Basculus that has the swift swim ability. It also has adaptability. I'm pretty sure, and those are two really good abilities on a Pokemon that's a water type. If you don't know, Rain boosts the power of water type moves. So you can have a Pokemon with Swift Swim, which doubles its speed in the water, using moves like Wave Crash, which do it's like base I think like 100 power in the rain, which boosts it, and you just start killing things. And Basket Legion is not weak by any means. And push comes to shove, you start spamming Last Respects, which is a move that like two Pokemon get. I think it's Basket Legion and Graveyard. Yeah, those are the two Pokemon that get it, and the way it works is the more of your allies die, the stronger this move gets. So if you have it in the back, you throw it out, start spamming Last Respects, and you start just killing things. And Basket Legion is not weak by any means, especially if you're running adaptability. It starts hitting it really hard. You can actually do Choice Band on it alongside Swift Swim if you don't want to run adaptability. You hit just as hard, if not technically harder sometimes, depending on where you're clicking. Really good mon. Basket Legion's really good. But this leads to standard tried and true Pokemon, Amoonguss being really good. Amoonguss, classic since Gen 5, the little mushroom's been everywhere. It has access to Pollen Puff to keep your opponent safe, Rage Power to redirect attacks. It gets access to like Sludge Bomb if you want to use it like sort of offensively, but more importantly, you have like Spore to put opponents to sleep. It's just a good all around Pokemon. It's easy to throw on any team. You can throw it on Ursaluna. You can throw it on the balanced teams. You can throw it on rain teams, sun teams, even. Um, but these are just like Sneasler does so much for this format that allows us to have those two things that kind of ramp off. There's also some other teams that aren't really used as much, like Size Spam is really popular. It's usually a team that revolves around Indeedee male or female. It depends. It used to be Indeedee female, although a lot of the times now people are using Indeedee male because he's more offensive, so they have more pressure with their Psychic Spam. But yeah, it's like revolved around Indeedee male and Armourouge, which they set up the psychic terrain and they start spamming this move called Expanding Force. And basically, if you're not a dark type, you start taking damage. Okay, and it's a pretty good strategy, and I feel like a lot of people have really kind of honed it to a point where it's perfected. The issue is there's a lot of counters to it, and especially because they can't hit dark types with this attack. And I feel like dark type Pokemon are becoming prevalent. There's the all encompassing Incineroar, who's always there because it checks so many Pokemon. There's also things like King Gambit, which is rising because Incineroar is also kind of rising. And because it has a defiant ability, it lowers attack. It's the whole thing. Because of those two Pokemon kind of being in a lot of teams and being in a lot of places, Psy Spam isn't really as popular as it could be. Although Sun's really popular, and some people kind of run a hybrid of like Psy Spam plus Sun, which is really interesting. So you have like your Sun teams, which usually revolve around Torkoal. Sometimes Ninetales, but it's normally Torkoal. It revolves around like Torkoal plus like Chlorophyll Mon. So you'd have like Venusaur. Well, previously you'd have Venusaur. I'm not sure what Chlorophyll Mons we use now. I think they use like Lilligant because she gets access to a lot of like really insanely really insane things, and she can start spamming. But also things like Hisuian Typhlosion, which is really cool. So you come out and you like Terrifier Eruption, and you start spamming it. And there's also some other tricks you can do with like a Pokemon with After Use. You can make Torkoal spam eruptions as well, and you just kind of nuke things in front of you. It's really fun, but I do think Sun is weaker than Rain. I do think the weather is the way it goes right now. Is Rain's at the top, Sun, Hail, Sand. I do feel like Sand's fine. Listen, we're gonna talk about those two next. We'll talk about Snow first. I called it Hail because it was Hail for so long, but there's no teams now because they reworked how Hail works this generation. So it's no longer based on, it's no longer where it damages you every turn if you're not an ice type. Now what it does is it's snow, it doesn't damage anyone, but if you're an ice type, you get a defense boost, which is really good for those bulky ice types that they love to put out, even though ice has like next to no resistances and a lot of weaknesses. It makes those Pokemon kind of better. But the real thing is, you only have one Snow setter that's kind of good. Obama Snow exists, and it is a Pokemon in the game. It is definitely a Pokemon in the game, and you can use it. But Alolan Ninetales exists, and it's better. So 9 times out of 10, you're going to be using Alolan Ninetales. And Alolan Ninetales recently won an event because of it being like they like put choice specs on it, and it was spamming Blizzard, and he basically made it like an offensive setter. And what's really good with that is it was an offensive setter that could counter other weathers, because obviously once one weather comes in, the previous one is gone. So if they set up rain and you switch in your Ninetales, the rain is gone, now it's snow. So it was kind of like a way to kind of counter that, and I do love when people do that. Um, so those teams usually settle around Ninetales, and Ninetales is just kind of providing support. You'd have Pokemon like Baxcalibur on there sometimes. I did see this one person do like a Slush Rush, like Satotl, not Satotl, Satitan, but like that didn't work too well. But mainly because now Hail does not hurt your team if you're not, an Ice type. There's more people trying Snow, and just kind of having like a Lonely Ninetales there as a way to counter weather, set up like Aurora Veil and like spam blizzards, but also have other Pokemon who just come in and reap the benefits of like, oh, they got rid of rain, so now I can come in and do this, or oh, they got rid of sun, so I feel safe to switch into this eruption because I won't take like full damage from it. I think that's a really good concept as well. Also, there is sand. It does exist. Hippowdon, I believe, is in the game, but Hippowdon is not good. I'm going to say that right now. Hippowdon is not good, even in singles. I think in singles there are better sand setters, and the better sand setter, the only other one, is Tyranitar, and Tyranitar is really good. I think it's been good since Gen 2. It's just a very solid mon. Its typing's but with terrestrialization, you can kind of help fix and mitigate some of those weaknesses. But I do feel like sand teams have been kind of popping up. People have been using like drill, Exadrill on them. It's kind of using them alongside, like I said, Garchomp earlier. I don't know. Long story short, this regulation is a lot of fun. If you've never played competitive Pokemon before and you would like to try it, I say get into this format because of how easy it is to get into. You don't have to worry about fighting through a Kyogre or trying to figure out what this Calyrex does versus that one, or trying to say why does Kyurem look like that and he's not his normal size, and what happened to my Reshiram. You don't have to think about things like that. You can just go in, you can say, oh man, you know what, I like Ursaluna, I want to make an Ursaluna team. You can build a pretty simple team revolved around Ursaluna. I actually had one built not too long ago. This was back when we were allowed to use Cresselia, but I can just replace Cresselia with a different mon because she was my Trick Room setter. So it'd be like Ursaluna, Porygon 2, Comfey, Hisuian Gudra, and then I had like two other mons. I think it was like Incineroar, Rillaboom. And you could just do something like that, something simple, and you can just go out there and have fun with it. I'm excited to see if they're going to do a new regulation. I remember them saying they might just go back to G after H is done, but I'm hoping we move on to like Regulation I. I know the new Pokemon games are coming out, so there's a chance that can mess things up. We can just move on to the new format. We'll see. But I'm hoping we move into Regulation I, and that kind of it's like the two restricted legend format, because that's something we haven't had with this generation, but we've had with previous generations where we had a format that had two restricted legends per team. And I would like to see some combos, especially with some things like imagine Miraidon and then Kyogre, because you'd get 100% accurate Thunders that will be boosted because of the electric terrain. It's so good. I'm sorry. It's the mind is crazy. It would be so insane. And then Kyogre could be next to it, spamming like Origin Pulse. It would be insane. It would be crazy. Anyway, I'm gonna stop here. I've been rambling on long enough. If you like Pokemon, that's great. Let me know. If you want me to talk about your favorite Pokemon, you should probably tell me what it is, and I'll make a video on it. I'm bored enough where I have time to do that now. So I'll make a video on it. If you want to get into Pokemon more, I can give you tips. That'd be cool to talk about. If you're still playing Pokemon TCG Pocket, let me know. I'm still playing the game. I love it. We're supposed to get a new set in December, so expect a video about the new set when the new set drops, and it better have good steel cards. Anyway, bye.